Hello, I'm Boston Carter. Have you ever wondered why you are the way you are? What makes you, you? I will introduce you to you in a way never before seen or thought about. It is something that will surprise you, maybe even shock you. It has been hidden from humanity forever, right under our noses, until now. The first thing I want to tell you is that your mind functions within an energy system of duality. For example, yin-yang, up-down, etc. Duality by its nature is twofold. Makes sense, right? But what we tend to miss is that duality has its own duality. For example, let's look at the ancient Chinese concept of yin and yang. Yin is dark and yang is light. Daylight is yang, nighttime is yin. Yet yin is always within yang, and yang is always within yin. During the day, the sun shines on a hill, casting a shadow on one side of it. The light side of the hill is yang, while the shadow side is yin. Easy enough. But what about during the night, when the moon shines on a hill? The light side is still yang, and the dark side is still yin. But this yin and yang are not the same as the daytime yin and yang. We can say that light and shadow are a duality within day and night. The Chinese labeled these as yin-yin for moon shadow, yin-yang for moonlight, yang-yin for sun shadow, and yang-yang for daylight. This shows that four exists out of the two. In Western thinking, fourness is represented by the four classical elements of fire, earth, air, and water. I read works written by those who study the elements in various ways and came up with a set of characteristics that, in my view, seem to function together in specific patterns of personality or perception. First, I will provide a short list of attributes of each element so you get a rough idea of what they are. Then, I will show you something amazing in our number system that has been unconscious from view. It is something that suggests fourness as patterns in nature, to which psyche belongs. But first, the elements. On the positive side, fire likes to empower others, has inexhaustible energy, is productive, honest, passionate, self-motivated, inspired, joyful, and very creative. On the negative side, some attributes that can seem negative are self-involved, impersonal, prideful, willful, impulsive, power-hungry, and impatient. In its positive form, Earth is dependable, practical, grounded, industrious, and patient. In its negative form, Earth can be slow, rigid, does not like demands on time, and does not like the unknown. On the positive side of air, we find a balanced perspective, a strong intellect, a drive for peace and harmony, logic and reason, expression through music and painting, and justice for all. On the negative side, air's fast mind can be overactive, bringing obsessive-compulsive issues. It can rely too heavily on logic due to lack of emotions, and it can be indecisive. In its positive form, water experiences deep emotions, has strong intuition, empathy, and natural healing through emotions. In its negative form, water loses itself in others, emotional instability, insists on connection through emotion, and overly sensitive. Now for the numbers. Dr. Carl Jung, a well-known psychiatrist and researcher, said that numbers were the bridge between the unconscious and consciousness. I will show you what I have discovered about numbers and how they might represent a bridge. I discovered what I call the Enneagrid, not to be confused with the Enneagram. The Enneagrid is so named because it revolves around the number 9, and Ennea is the Greek root for 9. I discovered the Enneagrid while looking at a multiplication table. I had recently read something about how numerologists, meaning those who study the archetypes of numbers, have a practice called rooting down the numbers. This means that you take any multi-digit number, such as 12, and root it down to a single digit by adding the individual digits within it. In the case of 12, 1 is added to 2, which begets 3. 3 is the rooted down digit of 12. As I worked the rooted digits of the multiplication table, I saw something. I couldn't quite get what it was while only working in my head. So I created a grid and began writing out the table in rooted form. Then I saw it, and much more. Within the rooted table, I noticed something weird with the number 9. The number 9 creates a line that separates these blocks of numbers, 1 through 8. This pattern repeats infinitely no matter how far out you take the table. Those 1 through 8 numbers form pairs that add to 9, 1 and 8, 2 and 7, 3 and 6, and 4 and 5. When we then place a line where the pairs meet, we have something that seems familiar. We see 4 blocks of numbers within the 9-line block. Jung said that 4 is wholeness, and that numbers were the archetypes to bridge the unconscious to consciousness. We can look here and see something symbolic that agrees with his assessment. But there's more. The upper left and lower right quadrants exactly mirror each other. Respectively, the upper right and lower left quadrants also exactly mirror each other, almost like axes of opposites. In fact, exactly like axes of opposites. However, there is one thing about this idea of 4 as wholeness that doesn't quite fit for me. This is a 2-dimensional field, but humans live in a 3-dimensional field, 4 if you count time. What if we draw lines on this 2-dimensional form to connect all the points of each number pair? As you can see, a geometric shape appears. If we use these number patterns in a cube and then draw these same lines, a 3-dimensional shape appears. This shape is commonly seen as the crystalline form of hydrogen and other elements, while this shape is known as Metatron's cube. Putting together the first 2 topics of elements and numbers, consider the elements as symbols of archetypal patterns and place them into opposites. Reflect on the elements as profiled through astrology and alchemy, and placement may be thought of as 2 main axes in fire, water, and earth, air. I have placed the elements this way for reasons that will become clear in a moment. The elemental patterns of perception model depicts 2 axes of opposites, represented by the 4 classical elements. One is survival mode patterns, and the other is individuated or mastered patterns, what I would actually call compassion. Water reflects fire and earth reflects air, exactly like the Enneagrid number patterns. For ease of understanding, I call the water-fire axis the tree of life, because it is about self and self, as Jung defined them. I mean, self with a capital S represents one's higher self, or God within, while the lowercase s self represents ego. Earth-air axis I call the tree of knowledge, which encompasses both knowledge of the mysteries, for earth, and intellectual knowledge, for air. This image of the patterns of perception model is incomplete to protect my copyrights. You may learn about the entire model by viewing a separate video which is available on our website at elementalpatterns.com/model.